Well, good morning. Hi, it's so nice to be here. So when I signed up to give action initially, Father's Day, Father's Day, I wanted to talk about my dad. I'm in Harryland a lot of these weeks and for a while. However, Rev Denis, and I agree with him, really like to have a service that builds on itself. So me going off on my father, maybe not quite as elegant and eloquent as one would wish. So my task today is to sort of integrate some notion of Sabbathness and Harry. So you'll notice the shirt. Right? Very butch on me. Bought my dad's shirt, my dad's sweater, and his wonderful tie tack, right? And you're going to see there are three pieces of sculpture here. That's his as well. So, so when I was started thinking, now how do I do this? How do I integrate this? I really started thinking about retirement, which is really like the great Sabbath, right? Oh, great, you're done with all that work, and then you get to rest. And when I stopped working officially in 2015, but then taught another whole course the spring of 2016. So that's sort of when I retired, which is now almost 10 years ago. And my only goal in retirement was learning. It's like, what am I going to do? I'm going to learn. That was how far I went. And and then things kind of fell into place as they do. I think I had already been working at Casey Farm, and then I got more into working at Casey Farm. And I tried to volunteer at the Wickford Public Library. No, they were too busy. All right. So that didn't happen. And then, and again, this is pre-COVID, right? When it was a different world. And then I wandered in here, was Jan Knost was giving sermons, and one was on Emily Dickinson, and one was on the American Transcendentalist. And so I was just interested in learning, felt like a good idea to be among people on a Sunday. Seaman, I don't know if Anne's on, and I was not a member. She said, "Oh, why don't you join the worship committee?" Oh, I love worship. I'll join the worship committee. And then we come today, and this particular spring, I was like, I was ready for a vacation. And of course, worship, we're kicking into full gear in the summer. We don't actually get a vacation. And I was like a bit cranky about it. I was cranky about this until I learned I had to move and my house was being sold. Then it was like, oh man, if I only had the one problem of not having a vacation from the worship committee. Well, back to it. However, this whole thing made me seriously reflect on who I am and how I retire. And it really made me think of my parents. And, in particular, I'm going to focus on my dad. So my father, he was born in 1912. So he's of that generation. When he has amazing capacity. He was brilliant and he loved life. So, for example, one little example is when he was 9 years old in 1921, he built a radio. He's first generation born. He probably learned English in school. He's just a being of that kind of capacity. And so when he retired, he was having big heart attacks in 1965. He retired in 65 and he moved to Florida, couldn't stand the cold, and then lived to 97. So that was like a good move. And at first, my parents had a house, and there were all the house things, and armadillos, and tropical trees, and what one has in Florida. And eventually that got hard and they moved into this gated community. And my father really seriously took up sculpture. And, one of the things, could he just take up sculpture? And if you see here, there's two stone pieces, a wood piece he carved in slate. And of course, then he had to teach sculpture because this is Harry. He's very expansive. And when he died, he really, at his funeral, there were so many friends. So when I think back at myself, at what I've structured, now I just want to say one more thing. He and my mother, again, they had more capacity than I did. They also were worldwide travelers. He did slip on the rocks in the Galapagos. He did fall in a shower in Fiji. He really was a worldwide traveler. However, again, I'm a simpler person. And what I see, though, is that the learning, which, COVID has given me more learning through Zoom, et cetera, than I could have ever asked for. I have a rich life of learning. Aspect is kind of work and community work and stuff. And it's kind of a good thing. It's kind of a good thing. So the Sabbath of retirement is an active Sabbath sometimes. And it can be full of people, and it can be deep as well and solitary. So happy Father's Day to all the fathers, and happy Father's Day to my father, Harry. May his spirit rejoice in the afterworld. And if you feel like seeing, there are 3 sculptures. He was a dentist and an orthodontist. This is the one that, to me, is the tooth sculpture. But and then there are 2 more. So feel free to wander over there at the end.
Please rise now as you're willing and able for hymn number 317 in the Gray Book. We Are Not Our Own. Believe in the divinity of Jesus or even God at all. And too many who claim to believe in Christ don't actually follow the word and work of Jesus of Nazareth, the Jesus described in the Christian Bible as a rabbi who demanded equity and the sharing of resources, embracing all as he rebelled against the status quo, seeking justice for the most vulnerable. Filer, in his book titled America's Prophet, says that really, we are a nation for whom the most compelling and most parallel story is that of Moses. We are the children of Moses, and he is the father of our national identity, Filer says, perhaps more than anyone else. He fits the image of the ideal American hero more than Jesus does. Moses led his people out of the chains of the oppression of an unjust king. He brought together 12 different tribes to form a unified identity, a culture, and a system of laws and morality. He led them to a new and inhospitable land where they would eventually thrive and prosper. This country started off as a bunch of colonies under the control of the monarchs of England, France, Spain, Germany, the Netherlands, a dozen countries with countless cultures within them. We were rich and poor, landholders and indentured servants with different levels of education from different races and faiths. 250 years ago, less than 100 miles from here, began a revolution that brought together 13 colonies into what was, and probably is now more than ever, an aspirational name, the United States of America. George Washington, the father of our nation, was a kind of Moses figure. He was imperfect, often frustrated, and reluctant to take charge. He, perhaps more than any other founding father, managed to help form this nation's practices and norms. He and the other founders disagreed about every detail of organizing and governing and protecting the nation, but they shared one unshakable vision. The United States would never, ever tolerate a monarch. No kings ever. And they knew the only way to prevent kings from taking power from the democracy they were building was to fashion one people out of many. Kings, they knew, would break down democracy by breaking down the cohesiveness of the people. Their job was the job of Moses: create a civil society through social cohesion. In that time, before rapid transit, electronic media, and 24-hour news cycles, when the nation was still mostly rural, observance of Sabbath on Sunday was not only common, it was de rigueur, a holdover from the Puritans. According to Judith Shulevitz in her book, The Sabbath World, one of the reasons the Puritans wanted to be apart from Europe and its customs was because they wanted the freedom to practice the right kind of Sabbath. It was to be a time of rest and reflection, study and prayer without commerce. The Sabbath brought people together in those early days of this country, forced them to rest and recreate together, like it or not. For enslaved people, at least those who worked outside the homes of their enslavers, it was the one day a week of rest that they got. While most may have been Muslim in Africa, on this land they were schooled in Christianity. And what they learned on that blessed day of rest was that they would receive the salvation of God in two ways. Jesus was the balm, a salve for their suffering. And if they lived and obeyed according to his will, they would somehow, someday, be saved. But by the end of the Civil War, things had changed a little bit for the Sabbath. The first industrial revolution had begun migration to cities and longer hours of production. Then things got worse in the aftermath of the war. The Sabbath was beginning to dwindle. Production and wealth building were becoming more important than practicing the right kind of Sabbath of the Pilgrims. In his 1869 book, The Innocents Abroad, which was the account of a travel excursion to what he called the Holy Land, Mark Twain wrote about European Sabbath of the time. He wrote, "Some of them go with wife and children to a beer hall and sit quietly and genteelly drinking a mug or two of ale and listening to the music. Others walk the streets, others drive in the avenues, others assemble in the great ornamental squares in the early evening to enjoy the sight and the fragrance of flowers and to hear the military bands play. No European city being without its fine military music at eventide. And yet others of the populace sit in the open air in front of the refreshment houses and eat ices and drink mild beverages that could not harm a child. They go to bed moderately early and sleep well. The change that has come over our little party, our little excursion, is surprising. Day by day, we lose some of our restlessness and absorb some of the spirit of quietude and ease that is in the tranquil atmosphere about us and in the demeanor of the people. We grow wise a space. We begin to comprehend what life is actually for. Even then, the breakdown of the day of rest was breaking down rest itself and breaking down our shared identity, our ability to just be together in the public squares. Things got worse with the meteoric rise of market capitalism in the second industrial revolution of the late 19th century, with its ethos of growth at all costs. Unions in the early 20th century helped bring about the birth of the weekend and the new concept of leisure time for the working class. But rest began to be replaced with consumption. 100 years after Mark Twain's account of his excursion, the Sabbath was in detrimental decline. Businesses were growing across the nation and families were constantly on the move, linked by interstate highways, all needing 24/7 support. Gas stations and restaurants had to be open. Eventually, so too did the stores. So blue laws restricting business on the Sabbath died of corporate need. The idea of Sunday as the Sabbath looked farcical as a greater percentage of Americans observed Sabbath on Friday or Saturday, and even more stopped belonging to faith communities. According to the Gallup organization, in 1978, 74% of Americans went to church regularly, and over half said that observing the Sabbath was in some way important. Now, 29 of us attend worships, 29% of us attend worship services regularly, and about the same number say that the Sabbath is in some way important. That means that more than 70% of Americans don't care about observing any kind of Sabbath and don't get that day of rest and recreation together, away from work, away from commerce. And that's a shame because according to Judith Shulevitz, there are some very good reasons for observing a Sabbath. Sabbath gives us a day of blessed rest, whether we think we need it or not, a chance to recharge and reconnect to what is really important. Sabbath brings us together, sharing meals and stories, forming an identity as a community bound together by something bigger than ourselves. Sabbath helps us see in those quiet times together our shared humanity, to really connect outside of the mechanisms and restrictions of competitive capitalism. Sabbath gives us the time to dream together about the future, about what could be. Sabbath, according to Ms. Shulevitz, makes time sacred and moral, a reminder that we all need and deserve rest and recreation so that we can be healthy and creative for the good of ourselves, our families, and our communities. Sabbath, according to theologians like Walter Brueggemann, has historically gotten its power from the fact that everyone deserved it together. After all, if everyone is off, every business is closed, so everyone is more likely to be together rather than working on their own things separately. The power of Sabbath comes from the fact that it is universally required. Even when things are forced upon you, as long as everyone is doing it, it becomes part of your identity. But Ms. Shulevitz says that the other great power of Sabbath, the thing about Sabbath that we can hold on to in this modern, diverse world, lies in its being commonplace. She writes, "We who look at religion from the outside think of transcendence as something that occurs at special moments, in concentrated bursts of illumination. But people raised in homes where religious ritual occurs over breakfast and at dinner and in school and throughout weekends know that revelation commingles promiscuously with routine. If ritual is art, then it is stretched over the frame of habit." And that's why I think being here together on Sunday is important. Being here reminds us that we are not alone and that our rituals make our lives an art. It's an art that reminds us of our frailty and our power and how the two are commingled and interdependent. Being here reminds us that we have responsibilities to each other and that those responsibilities can bring us incredible joy. Being here helps us not be isolated. It helps us help others, which is something we all want to do. And sometimes it even forces us to accept help. We don't have to force our Sabbath, though, on others or adapt its day to coincide with the Sabbaths of other faiths. We just need to do our own Sabbath our own way. Imperfect as it is, awkward as the rituals may sometimes feel, our power comes from this gathering and our gathering with friends and family on this day. So take it seriously. Show up, even if the blurb doesn't sound interesting. Take seriously, whoever is up here speaking, show up, because this time together is important. The founders of this country got a lot of things wrong. God knows they got a lot wrong, but they were right about one thing. Kings and would-be dictators build strength by breaking down social cohesion. So let your Sabbath be your day of building up this social cohesion any way that you can. May it be so. Please rise now in body or in spirit for hymn number 399, Vine and Fig Tree.